Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the granddaddy of them all. Welcome to episode 3 of Murph and Sully's Youth Athletics Podcast. I'm your co-host, Mr. Ed Sullivan, also known as Sully, and I'm joined by
Murph, Dan Murphy.
The man, the myth, the legend. So Murph, we just got done with episode 2, where we kind of took a trip in our time machines back to when we were youth athletes.
Yes.
And I did get some feedback from the show. Things that I don't know if we can necessarily fix, but comment number 1 was we need more wham.
We can't fix that. We got in trouble.
Yeah, for those of you that saw our last episode, we tried being cute and playing Careless Whisper in the background, and it resulted in us being copyrighted by YouTube. Glorious.
Glorious. Glorious.
Okay. Hey, we actually have some people that are on and watching, Murph.
Yeah.
We have comments, which is unbelievable.
Yes.
So I'm not sure who is in the chat right now, but we thank you. We are actually going live here, Murph.
All right.
First live episode.
Yeah. Very exciting.
Second thing, Murph, that was mentioned was trying to get you a hairpiece. I don't know. Someone said that your bald head does not work well with the aesthetics of the show.
I'm trying to dull it a little bit, but no hairpiece. Sorry. I earned this.
And then the last thing was topics for future shows. Where and when does Murph use his AARP card?
Why are there, it's interesting. There only seem to be comments about you, or is it that you're only reading, about me. Why are you not reading the ones about you?
Selective comment reading, Murph. Selective comment reading. Don't hate the player, hate the game. But Murph, I know that you mentioned that you wanted to get some things, off your chest. So Go for it.
All right. Well, a couple of housekeeping items, if I may. We might need to. I think we might, Sully, need to name this Murph's "Oh yeah" moments. I forgot to say that. I forgot. Being elderly, I sometimes forget things. So just 4 things, quick. I want to mention. First, with our huge and growing popularity, we've received some requests to be on the show from some folks, some relations, some friends, some former athletes, etc. One request in particular, which could possibly be defined as stalking, came by an alumni who somehow tracked down your phone number, Sully, as you recall, and reached out to you, I'm sure to your surprise and potentially chagrin as well, requesting to be on the show. And as we both were communicating about that by text, both of us pretty much had the same reaction. That's a hard no. Absolutely not. Hard no. You know who you are.
Oh boy.
For many reasons. Secondly, I feel it's important. There's been a couple of comments made. I haven't made any comments on the air about my pink headphones. There's 2 reasons I wear pink headphones currently. One is my kids steal everything from me. I have twin daughters who are 18 and my son who's 20. He steals only socks, which is fine. My daughters steal sweatshirts a lot of times, and that really bugs me because I love my sweatshirts, as many of the people in the audience know. So I feel like turnabout's fair play. So I took these headphones for the first one, plus a little bit of desperation. I was like, oh no, I need headphones. Plus a little homage to the girls that I've coached before, to say hi for the girls. And so that they know that I'm thinking about them always. The third thing, the shirt I'm wearing is actually a gift from the girls that I most recently coached, with a few sayings on it that are kind of my thing. Do you mind if I show it, Sully, really quick?
I do not mind.
Okay.
It's better than looking at your face. So.
All right, hold on. Let's see it. Tell me if you can read them and maybe read them out.
Let's see. There's deny.
Which actually, if I may interrupt, one of the 7th graders that I coached, when she read that, she said, Danny, what's that? She knows who she is too. Go ahead.
I love Denny's, home of the Grand Slam. Let's see. Go run a ladder.
Yep.
Oh, I thought that was out of your repertoire.
No.
Fill the lane.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. The other ones I cannot tell. Oh, there's one. I love my hot dogs with ketchup. That's
No,
nice.
that is not on there, folks.
Are you
That
sure?
is not on there. Yeah, it's not on there.
I'm pretty sure I see it.
Can you read this one?
That sounds like my daughters.
Yes. All right, that's good enough. That's good enough. So yes, the girls I coach will know that well. They often sound like my daughters. All right. And then the final thing, let's see. I want to say a big thank you to my buddy Pat for reminding me of one of my memorable moments that I forgot to mention. He and I, when Small Providence College, the second smallest Division I school in the NCAAs, reached the Final Four. And before they did, they were in the Eastern Regional in Louisville, Kentucky. And he and I and 8 other people, 6 of which were strangers, but we decided to band together, and we drove the RV down from Providence, Rhode Island to Louisville, Kentucky. And we had an absolute blast, and Providence won as well and went to the Final Four. So I thank you, Pat, first of all, and thank you all my friends who have made some comments as well. But that's all I got, Sully.
This has been Oh Yeah Moments. With Murph, brought to you by Dan Murphy of Stepwise Financial.
Our first sponsor, by the way.
That's right.
First of many.
The first of many. Once again, if you're interested in sponsoring, you know where to hit us up at. We'd love business sponsors.
Yes, we do.
So, Murph, today our topic is a topic that I'm not sure is going to be enough for one episode, but we'll give it a shot anyways. We're going to talk about our coaching philosophy.
Yes.
So Murph and I, both coach 8th grade teams this year. Both teams made it to the championship. Murph coached a parochial school girls team. I coached a public school boys team. And we're going to kind of go through our season. We're going to compare and contrast. And within all the actions that we demonstrated, you're going to see our coaching philosophy come to light.
Yes.
So, Murph, once your team has been decided, tryouts have happened, you know the team you're rolling with. How do you define roles and goals on the team?
Good question. Well, I think it's important to tell the kids that we coach that everybody has a role on a team. Whether it's track and we need the points and somebody's got to run in a race that they didn't know about before or things like that. Or it's, the one who's really great at whatever thing it is. You got to do that, right? So for the basketball team in particular, we had a couple of girls who were scorers. We had girls who were super aggressive on defense. We had girls who were great rebounders. We had, and this is some of them, by the way, did many of these things well, by the way. Great passers, great defenders in the sense of steals and stuff like that. We played a very aggressive, high pressure defense. And in fact, it led to most of our points, frankly. So we stepped up the tempo. And the thing I think about that too is that every team is different as well. Certain players like mine now, or formerly, they love to run. They love to run and they love to be fast. And what we do is try to teach skills that make them able to do things well at a higher and higher speed so that they're a step ahead of their competition. So it's probably kind of the basics, if you will, but there are teams that are maybe slower and certain teams that are faster, certain teams that have a good basketball IQ, if you will, and things like that. So we try to divide it up and see where kids can, use their strengths best. And that's the other thing too, is that putting kids in situations that they're more likely to succeed for themselves and the team. So what about you?
Well, for my team, we had a team that loved to shoot the 3 ball, the Murphy special, the other Murphy special, as they'd call it. My guys love to shoot the 3.
They do.
And we would dictate our practice plan based off of different scenarios during a game when you would take a 3-point shot, whether it's various layers of the offense, whether it's in transition.
In transition?
Oh, all the time. We have 2 or 3 specific drills that were specifically for transition 3s. We generally
take the easy 2, Sully. All right, fine. Just go ahead.
Well, when your team is shorter than the other team, you have to take advantage of that 3-point shot if it's wide open, because for my guys, the 3-point shot was a higher percentage than going against a 6-footer that's in the lane. And that's why we stuck with that. Some of my guys were shooters. Some of my guys were, as you said, designated rebounders. I had one athlete in particular whose primary goal was just to go in the game and cause havoc, dive on the floor, just get real physical, change the tempo of the game. That was his role.
Business, huh?
Mm-hmm. Like, and there were some. That's right, giving him the business. And I had some guys that, maybe didn't play as much as others, but they knew their role, right? Supportive teammates from the bench, right? Always ready if I called upon them to get in the game, always ready to come in and make something happen.
Awesome. Very cool. All right, so let's talk about practices. A lot of people prepare.
Are we talking about practice?
Yeah, I think
practice?
so. Practice? What are you, Allen Iverson? Practice.
I was back in the day. A lot of people said that I mimicked his style. I was a stocky Allen Iverson.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
Just leave it out there. Comment if you will, everybody. Feel free to do that one. Let's talk about how we prepare for practices. You start.
Well, it's all dependent on how the last game went.
Okay.
What we need to improve on from that last game. Mm-hmm. So if we had difficulty breaking the press, that means that we're going to take a good portion of that next practice, not only learning how to effectively break it, but maybe even throwing in some different wrinkles or facing different defenses so that we're ready for whatever's thrown at us. A lot of time with our offense, the read and react offense, which I know you love, it's all dependent on the next layer of the offense. So I would sit back and look at my Rick Torbett Better Basketball Handbook, and I would see, okay, today we're going to be introducing the pin and skip. Here are the different drills that I'm going to be doing to implement the pin and skip.
Nice.
And then oftentimes with my practices, we always stress the basic fundamentals. Regardless of how talented or how athletic my group was, we always had time carved out to go over the basic fundamentals: dribbling, passing, shooting, rebounding throughout the entire practice.
Excellent. Because
once you develop that muscle memory, right, it's just going to come naturally in the game.
Yep.
And then also my team was very competitive, right? I would argue that sometimes the opponents we faced were not very talented. I would argue that we had more competitive practices than we did games. My guys just love to get after it. Yeah. I mean, they eat, breathe, sleep basketball.
Nice. And
they just would play with such intensity in practice. A lot of times I'd have to make sure that no one would get hurt because they went that much to the wall, giving it everything they got.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool. Some similarities there.
So how about you? When you develop a practice plan, what does Murph's practice plan look like?
Well, I'd say two things that we want to work on as fundamental to every practice is skills and running, being in shape. We want to make sure that we're always the faster team, and that fast is done a lot of ways. There's track fast where you're just from point A to point B or around a track. But there's basketball fast, and it's different. It's about anticipating. It's about being aggressive. It's about that first step being yours, whether it's on defense or offense. So we really push, the first part of the practice is usually things like running stairs, running a few ladders, dribbling up and down, back and forth, skills, like you said, fundamentals. And we shoot a lot. We shoot a ton. Didn't show on our shooting percentage, girls, so there's always room for improvement. That's okay. Always. And also, one of the things that we really, as an overlay to say that is we run them for I like to say there's a lot of coaches that just run. And sometimes I feel like it's too much. It's like running for the sake of running or running for punishment. Sometimes you got to do that, consequences and all that. But I look at it as running with a purpose. Like we want to be out there and pushing it, because if we're in the fourth quarter in a tight game, we're gonna be in better shape than somebody, and we're gonna be able to get better. So we shoot free throws when we're tired. We never shoot free throws in the beginning of the practice ever. We work on skills. A lot of my coaches over the last 4 years that we've always been, Josh in particular, but all of them really, we take a player aside and we just pick a skill that we think they need to work on, or they think they can get better at, and we think they're capable of doing. And we work with them individually. And I will tell you that kids really, really respond to that one-on-one time where you can talk to them about how they can make themselves better. And when they make themselves better at anything, and always it's the little things, we'll talk probably a lot about that too, is it builds confidence brick by brick. It's like building a house, right? And so that's what we do for all practices.
Different than the bricks that you throw up during pickup games. Ho, ho, ho.
Go ahead.
No, just sorry. Just had to get that in there. I get that. Now, I was going to say, you and I had some differences there in terms of our teams.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, you had 6 girls.
Yep.
And you had one of the best coaching staffs in the business.
Probably the best, yeah.
I was by myself.
Yeah.
Actually, I just made a comment. We'd like to thank Wombat Carnival, the band, that's watching live.
Yeah.
One of your assistants, Mr. Jeff Vittorio, laughing live, also known as Mo, the artist formerly known, well, he's not formally known as, but we have him tuning in right now. So you have that situation.
Check him out on Spotify, by the way. Check him out on Spotify, Wombat Carnival. Just saying. Trying to help my buddy out.
You are the manager of the Wombat Carnival.
That's right.
That's right. The promoter. But I had, going back to our topic, I had 10 kids and I was by myself.
Yeah.
So, there's certain situations where coaches, are by themselves. There's certain where they have a staff. It's just being able to utilize their resources effectively.
Yeah.
So Murph, since we've dove into practices, how do you prepare for a game?
It's interesting because the first 2 years that our current girls played, there was pretty good competition, to say the least. Our girls are very talented. They play a lot of basketball inside and outside of our school. And they can beat a lot of teams, actually, kind of across the board, which is awesome. But we, in the first 2 years, had a very competitive league. In fact, lost in the championship game in a heartbreaker to a team that was kind of our, if you will, our nemesis. And in the second championship in 6th grade, we beat them in a very competitive game. And we had a end of game 3. I don't hate to say, it was awesome. And we needed it. And they weren't being lazy. Like I said last time, no, we needed it. It was a tight game. We needed everything we could. The last 2 years has been really interesting because there hasn't been that challenge, actually. We even moved up in a division, and we requested to do that because we wanted to keep the competition level high. And in fact, it kind of turned against us a little bit, actually. They, believe it or not, the talent, especially in their 7th grade year, was not very good. So we really focused actually in preparing for games on what can you work on in this game that we've been working on in practice that you haven't done before. Because and this is true regardless of your competition. The opponent is not the competition. You're your own competition. What the opponent does is gives you situations to react to. So we just worked on things like, okay, this is a team that, barring something crazy, we're probably going to beat. So let's not even worry about the score. Let's worry about execution of a move or a play or whatever it is individually and as a team that makes us better. So when we do face competition in tournaments and other things like that, we're going to be better. And it's about being better all the time, right? So, and in the last year, the competition was a little better, but still not quite as good. And we had a few competitive games just actually outside of our regular schedule in tournaments, and we got them in tournaments for that reason, to make sure that they face competition, and they rose to the challenge. So preparing for a game is about reminding them of what we went over in practice and the purpose of it, and taking that to the game. And then really just I think that the key thing, and I'm talking a little too much, but the key thing is that we practice a lot more than we play. So it's important in practice to commit things to, as you said before, the muscle memory. So we do things over and over and over again to make them so conditioned that we're not actually thinking. The Michael Jordan thing, right? Totally unconscious, right? That's what we want them to do on the court. Play instinctually, play aggressively. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Push the action, push the play, control the play, dictate the play. So that's what we talk about in the games. And then just, the fundamentals of boxing out, which,
I was going to say, we differ here.
Yeah.
So after every game, well, first things first, I have 1 or 2 managers on my team, and we film every game.
Awesome.
We film every game, and there's this technology called Google Classroom that all the kids have access to. Yeah. And I always, the night of a game, I will post the game film immediately after the game, regardless if we won big, lost big, barely won, barely lost, sort of in between. I'm taking down notes in my scorebook about what I noticed from our team, what I noticed from the opponent, players that stood out for good or bad.
Yeah.
And I use that to develop my game plan for the next game. So I review the film, I take notes. Sometimes I'll even throw film out to my other coaching colleagues that have coached middle school basketball, and we will dissect the opponent and then game plan from there based on what are the opponent's strengths, what are their weaknesses, how can we exploit the weaknesses and attack the strengths. And, from there, generally throughout that game plan, each person going back to roles, they know their role and how their role fits into the game plan.
Okay. So are the kids, maybe I missed something. Are the kids seeing that film or are you?
Absolutely.
They separate from you?
Yeah, they'll watch it at home on their own, take their own notes.
Cool.
And then we will come in. There's one of the days at my school you can't actually hold practices because the gym's unavailable. Yeah. And don't get me started into days that a gym's unavailable.
Wouldn't be a Sunday, would it?
It might be a topic. And there on that day, we will actually bring the whole team into my classroom, and we will watch the game film, compare our notes, and then generally, I will explain to them what I see. And sometimes there's certain things that the kids will see that I'll be like, "Oh, I didn't catch that." Very cool. But we're looking at the game from a different lens. So I love that part of the game. That's the basketball sponge that I am, just soaking up all that knowledge.
Yeah. So moving on to the next topic. Can we move on to the next topic?
I think we can move on to the next topic.
All right, cool.
Go ahead, Murph.
Let's talk about the mix of winning and developing a team. I want you to tell me a little bit about that.
What do you mean when you say between winning and developing a team?
Team skills, individual skills, developing them as players, certainly, but maybe even as people.
Well, whenever we're coaching our kids, we're always trying to prepare them for real life.
Yep.
Right. And our good friend John Gravetti, who is a great viewer of the show, he mentioned that we have to prepare kids for life. Right. There's going to be times where kids are going to be successful, whether it's as kids, high schoolers, college kids, adults, and there's going to be times where they come up just short, or maybe they do fail. And in those situations, it's our job to get them ready for those moments. I know with my guys that I coached this year, we only lost 2 games, but trying to get them ready for those moments of, hey, you know what, we put in all this work and we were building up to this moment, and just because we came up short doesn't mean that we didn't accomplish anything. But also it'll drive them for when they compete in future big games or big game contests. In games, my style might be different than others, especially because I have 10 guys. In games where we were beating the opponent pretty handily, or it was the other way, that's when I'll get my lower half of my bench in to give them that time to develop. And then the close games, I will stick generally with my 6 or 7 man rotation. I think it's good to have that balance. You're putting kids in a position to be successful, the opportunities where they'll most likely succeed.
Yeah.
And there's also opportunities where circumstances are beyond our control and you put kids in those moments.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you're trying to shape the whole individual.
Yeah. It's a good point.
Did I answer your question?
It does. It does. And you know what, John, speaking to John, he made a really good point before about, to a lot of kids, I've coached A teams and I've coached B teams, and there's different motivations for kids coming into a sport. I think especially girls, it's just their interest in a sport is more varied. The boys are like either they're in it or they're out kind of thing. But with girls, it's a little different in that the girls are, they're girls who are super competitive. They play a lot of basketball. They want to play in high school and maybe beyond. And, so they're obviously supremely motivated and all those things, want to learn, want to grow, etc. And there's girls who are athletic and they just want to be athletic. They want to compete. And that's, we were, fortunate to have a lot of girls like that. And there are girls also that are doing it for social reasons. They want to be with their friends, which is awesome. And, or it's their second sport or maybe even third sport, or who knows, in parochial school, kids are doing it because their parents maybe signed them up. So you got to figure out a way to motivate them all. It's, because it's like John said, it's just another activity to some kids. But that doesn't mean that when they're in practice or in a game that they can't help the team and they can't have fun doing something. We had one girl in particular, she knows who she is, who did not like to shoot. And I would be from the bench for the first couple of years. She did shoot, and I don't know what it was, but anyway, she got this thing where she just didn't want to shoot, and she'd be wide open. She'd be turning, have her back to the basket where she got the ball, and she'd turn around, and I would yell from the bench, "Shoot!" And my coach, Mr. Jeff, would say, "Don't shoot," because that's his sense of humor. But anyway, but yeah, so you try to figure out, but the thing is that she said, "I love to play defense," and she just said this without me asking. I'm like, I said something like, "What do you want to do on the basketball court? What do you like to do?" And she's like, "I love playing defense," and she got this big glimmer in her eye, which is cool. So we just concentrated.
That's rare. Not many kids like playing defense.
That's right, and she didn't mind being physical. That's for sure. She loved it, and
you know what? Not to cut you off here, but
no, go ahead.
You know what? Now's the opportunity. A lot of people we get feedback on this show, and I'm going to call you out here because I want to hear your response.
Why do you always call me out? Why can't I?
You can call me out.
That's true. Okay, fair enough. Go ahead.
Okay, with the team as talented as you had, why did you refuse to run man-to-man defense?
Ooh, wow, you want to really provoke me. I like that. Well, there's a little story behind that. I grew up playing man-to-man defense. Most of my basketball that I've played, well, that makes sense. Most basketball that most people play actually is man-to-man. It's scrimmage, it's scrimmages, it's pickup. It's, and when we were kids, pickup was what you did 95% of the time. So, the first conversation that happened before you started the game was, I got him, etc. And I was lucky enough to play with a lot of really good older athletes, and I was not nearly as good as these guys were. So it's like, I'll just pass, but now I'm losing my train of thought. Oh, the man-to-man. I love man-to-man, and I think I want to play it more. I want to mix it up. I want to mix it up for the girls for future development. I want to mix it up for the teams that we play against, and all that stuff. So be creative, right?
I guess my question is, why didn't you start off with man-to-man in fifth grade?
Because in fifth grade, you have that collection of girls, and you've got, out of the 13 or 14 girls, so I think it's 14 at the time when we started with two teams, zone was easier to teach, I think, to some extent. And you could just focus on, this is your spot. I would argue that man-to-man actually is easier to teach, but I think we just started off with zone for that reason. Most people played zones, that kind of thing. It was just easier, I think, to teach. But quick, interesting story about that is in seventh grade, the only game that our team lost was because I insisted that they play man-to-man. And they won't like hearing this, but and I'll say it in the kindest way possible, but they basically refused to do it. And they were getting beaten by an inferior team. But at some point we turned it around, and They think it's because we switched out of man-to-man. That was my frustration, that they just simply wouldn't play it, frankly, which was, whatever.
What do you mean they wouldn't play it?
They wouldn't play it well. They didn't, their heart wasn't in it. And
like what aspects of man-to-man were they maybe struggling with or lacking the skill set of?
Wasn't the skill set, I don't think. It was just, man-to-man and other skills in basketball and other sports are about the want tos. And if you don't want to do something, a coach's job hopefully is to appeal to that and say, hey, this is why we want to do this. I obviously would say that I failed in that teaching, but the bottom line is that we switched halfway through because I just couldn't get their commitment. I couldn't get it. And I'll admit that that's my failing. But we came back and we closed the game to a close spot. And then we lost, I think by about 3 points. It was our only loss. And they were kidding me about it. We have a great relationship, I think. And they would say, oh, Mr. Murphy, that game we lost this year because of you made us play man to man. I said, girls, I'm not apologizing for that. You were the problem, not me. You didn't commit to it. So hopefully, and that's the truth. That's the truth. That is the truth. And as we'll probably come up on future podcasts, I believe wholeheartedly in telling your kids the truth. It doesn't mean that you have to, say, hey, by the way, you really stink. It's not that. It's about finding what they do well and telling them that, and telling them what they're capable of doing, and telling them what they need to work on. It's a positive way of telling them something that they need to work on, not to that they don't. Nobody stinks at anything until they haven't. Or I guess, how would I say it? People stink at everything when they haven't tried it, right? So that's what we try to emphasize, is that you're not going to get it the first time. Let's keep working. And by 8th grade, they were playing a lot more man to man, and they did well with it, actually. So it's just a difference.
My philosophy is you started early, because in order to run an effective zone, you need to have fundamental man-to-man principles.
I agree.
So, all through, now with my situation is different than yours. I only have them for 2 years, but 7th grade, it was all man-to-man. We'd run the shell drill in practice, and we'd be constantly stressing, see the man, see the ball, the importance of the help line, and then eventually, dealing with post play, dealing with helping the helper, how to defend the skip pass. Because that way, when we started going into zone defense and different types of pressing in 8th grade, because they had that fundamental base, they're able to run an effective zone. So I just wanted to challenge you on that.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And you know what? Yeah, I one thing I tell my kids too is I've made mistakes, 1 or 2. No, but I've made mistakes. I would say this year, actually, on some levels, I made the most mistakes. We didn't make the girls work as hard as they could, because I was thinking, it's 8th grade, and I want to make sure it's as fun an experience as possible. But what the message I lost there and relearned towards the end of the season, and we pushed them harder towards the end of the season, especially in that last couple of weeks before the championship game, was hard work is fun. If you're not working hard at something, you don't care enough about it, or so that's a lesson for life. So I failed them a little bit there. So we realized that hard work is a hugely important thing. So you got to work hard at whatever you do.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, I know my team, a lot of my guys, were very transparent with me to start the season, saying that they all planned
very
on
transparent, right?
Yeah. They want, yes,
my girls were too, but not quite the way that your guys were.
They were wordsmiths on the court, and they all said that I plan on playing high school ball, and they said, Coach, our fun is just naturally playing the game, but we want to win, and I coach practice to that mentality, right? As my good friend Don Kraus will say, and Don and I will actually talk after probably 90% of my games, because he coached for 30 years middle school basketball. He always has said, Ed, there are 3 things that your team needs in order to be successful: discipline, discipline, and discipline. And if you don't have one of those 3 things, your team's not going to be successful. So, and we mentioned in the last episode, there'll be certain drills that I would purposely restart 10, 11, 12 times until we finally got it. Now, granted, I have a luxury that you don't. I had 2.5 hour practices. You only have an hour and 15. But just stressing doing it the right way, because if you go through practice and you're just going through the efforts, going through the motions without actually doing it right, when it comes to the game, you're not going to do it right.
Yep.
And we built a culture that was, we were trying to build a championship culture, and where they were pushing each other to be better, right? And that competitive fire is going to hopefully lead them to the promised land.
Yep.
So,
despite the fact that Don likes ketchup on a hot dog,
we still love him. We actually encourage that on this show.
Yeah.
We encourage
even name it after me.
Hey, I'm not the one that makes up the names at the concession stand. You're gonna have to talk to our concession stand guru. I'm just the guy in charge of the sports on the floor.
Sure, you have a little influence.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
All right, go.
So, Murph, mistakes. Why should we embrace them?
It's a great question. Trying to convince kids that not only is it okay to make mistakes, but that you should embrace them is probably the hardest thing to do, especially when kids are super competitive. So, I think there's lots of different ways to put it, but I guess is if you're not making mistakes, you're actually not trying hard enough. You're not pushing yourself hard enough. So, that's a message that it's just a message that you have to push and push and push, especially with talented teams, regardless of the competition. You better be making mistakes because you're not going to get better faster. It's just that simple. And mistakes are part of life. And the other thing is just admitting them, and being honest with yourself and a coach being honest with you and saying, hey, you made a mistake, but you know what? You're working your tail off there. So mistakes are a good thing.
Right. And I'd say it's a two-way street.
My dog just came down.
Oh, boy. And I'd say it's a two-way street, Murph. From a coach's perspective, you want to put your athletes, especially if you have a team that is very talented, you want to put them in a position to fail at certain times. Yep. I know I would purposely sign up for tournaments where I knew the competition level was much greater than ours, but it allowed me to reinforce why we were doing what we were doing at practice, or reinforce certain habits that they were doing, why they weren't proper habits in the game. So from a coach's perspective, you got to put your athletes in that spot. As an athlete, you have to be willing to take the feedback, take it with an open heart and an open mind. And you have to be willing to say, how can I get better from this? Right? Just taking the feedback and having it go through one ear through the other isn't really taking the feedback.
No.
And the best athletes that we have coached take that feedback and they run with it.
Yep.
And I would argue that the best athletes obsess about it.
Yeah. Yeah. When you see a kid, one of the kids I coached this year, well, there was always a few actually, but you could see that her game changed after she made a mistake sometimes, and in a not a good way, like she wouldn't attack, and stuff like that. And I just kept trying to reinforce with her, so what if you missed a shot? You took it, you drove, whatever you did, you tried something, didn't work, or you did something that you usually do well and you didn't do well, or you made a mistake, or you missed a shot 3 times in a row. Guess what? You got to shoot again. You got to keep going. Got to keep pushing. So
shooters are going to shoot.
That's right. Got to be forgetful too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's see. How about teaching kids to be leaders themselves and coaching them? You're kind of their leader and their mentor and coach and things like that in one way, but we want to raise leaders, right? So any thoughts on how you do that?
It's just leading by example.
Yeah.
Right. It's leading by example, how they see me in the classroom, how they see me in the hallway, when I walk in the cafeteria, when I walk into the gym.
Yeah.
Right. All those aspects, I set the tone. Right. During the game, you'll never see me yelling at an official. As a result, my kids don't yell at the officials. Right. Oftentimes we see coaches who are giving the refs the business, or they're really giving them a hard time, or they're questioning everything. Yeah. Which is a great segue into our next episode, when we're going to actually have some Illinois High School Association officials on this podcast to kind of get their thoughts on everything. Yeah. But I set the tone, right? you can't force a kid to be a leader. Okay. But you can demonstrate the proper technique and the proper actions and words and methods so that if they're looking at you as a role model, they go, hey, you know what? Coach Sully's doing it this way. I should follow his lead because he knows what he's talking about.
Yep.
But once again, if you're doing things the wrong way or the improper way, then you're setting your athletes up for failure. So as a coach, you have to set the tone. Yeah, that's how you set the tone for leadership. How about in your perspective, Murph?
Well, I'll be fully transparent and say I sometimes give the refs a little bit of the business, but it honestly
a little bit.
Honestly, I think it's 90% of it is when I feel like the refs aren't being fair, like truly fair. You feel like there've been plenty of games where there's 15 calls on one side and there's 3 or 4 on the other, and stuff like that. It's like just keep it fair. Or the biggest thing is when refs, if you will, let them play in the beginning and it gets really physical. And what's going to happen towards the end of the game is it's going to get out of control. And sometimes kids get hurt. My own kids have gotten hurt at times, and that's not a good feeling because you feel like the ref kind of lost control of the game, if you will. But I will tell you that. As far as leadership, I'll stay at self.
I was going to say, Murph's going on a tangent. He's going on a tangent.
I stopped myself.
Save it for the next episode.
I will save it.
My goodness.
And I think like what you said is I approach every practice, every game as I want them to have fun, but there's fun is we make a lot of jokes during games, during practices, stuff like that, but it's for a purpose. Usually it's to lighten kids up a little bit, or say that it's not all about like just sweating and doing that stuff. It's like you gotta be able to laugh at yourself, and I'm a little too good at that sometimes. So the kids enjoy joining in and doing that too. But just leading them by example, like you said. I have had times where I have made mistakes where maybe I said something to an official, nothing terrible, because I don't usually do nothing terrible, but I'll say something to an official and I'll turn to the girl and say, you know what, that wasn't fair. I shouldn't have said that. That wasn't right. And like we talked about the coaches on the other bench sometimes saying some stuff.
So let me throw this at you. Now, obviously, the group of kids you have, great athletes, great competitors, excellent sportsmanship. How would you? Let's just play a little hypothetical scenario here. If you're giving the ref the business or having that conversation, and maybe you're not coming off in a way you want to, how would you respond to your athlete coming off following your lead? Right? What would happen if your athlete would start talking to the official because you've set that example? Yeah.
Honestly, it didn't happen that much with this group.
I'm saying, I know if it were to happen, how would you handle it?
I would tell them that the mistake was mine, that I was showing them that they could do that and they shouldn't do that. So, it's just about being honest and calling it like it is. And usually, like you said, I mean, you forget sometimes the impact that you have, especially with the younger kids. And that's why we love both of us coaching the younger kids, is because you have such an impact. And so you got to be really careful with what you say and what you do and how you carry yourself. I'm not afraid when I make a mistake like that to apologize. And you usually know pretty easily when a kid's doing stuff and they're getting, mouthy with the ref or whatever.
So what happened? Because I'm sure we have coaches listening out on this podcast.
Yeah.
If you recognize that a kid is maybe getting mouthy with an official, or I know my camera shot is really in close here, but the patented throw the hands up in the air after a call. What is your response as a coach once you see your athlete either talking to the official or maybe giving off body language that is not appropriate? What is your response as a coach?
Two things. It's one of two things or both. It's I do this. If I can put my hand up there, I do like this, and I'll say to them, which means level yourself out, relax, calm down, because sometimes I've had the situation where I only had 5 girls one year, so I couldn't take them out, or take them out and just bring them to the side and just say, hey, you know what? And if it was me doing the example, I already told you, what I do. But if it was just kind of, if you will, out of the blue, I would just say, I took you out because you need to calm down, first of all, because you're no good to us when you're out of control emotionally. And if you're giving the refs a hard time, you're not focusing on what you can do. So just that.
I was going to say, for me, it's automatic. I don't even care if I have to pull a Gene Hackman in Hoosiers and have to pull one off the court to say, with 4 people on the floor, my team's on the floor.
Yeah.
I'm not going to stand for it.
Yeah, I've been tempted, yeah.
And we'll have that conversation like you mentioned, but I'll always leave it. Middle schoolers, young adolescents are always big on choice, right? So I will say to them, it won't be me determining when they go back in the game. I'll say to them, when you feel like you've calmed down enough and you're ready to play the game as we've taught you to play and not engage with the officials, you let me know when you're ready to go back in. Right? Yeah. Yeah. I won't make that decision. And I have had some kids who after 2 or 3 minutes will say, hey, coach, I'm ready. And then I'll have some kids that'll sit out the whole rest of the game.
Yeah.
Coach, I'm not ready to go back in.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Right. And maybe they blame you or whatever, but the point is the same. It's like, yeah, you weren't ready. Good.
Yep. Okay. And you know what? Realizing how their attitude in that moment could affect the team. Some guys are well enough to recognize, hey, you know what? I'm not in the right mindset right now. Yeah. And I might go out and say something or do something that I regret. For the sake of the team, I'm going to sit here on this bench because me sitting here supporting my teammates is better than me potentially causing an issue for me and my teammates.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. It's a good point. I actually did have one kid in my daughter's year that she loved to shoot threes. And at the time I liked the three even less. But she would always, she knows who I'm talking about. She's there.
I know who you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
We had a couple of nicknames for it. Chucker was one of them. But she would take the ball. She would dribble from one end of the court around the 3-point circle to the other. She'd get in the corner and she'd pop a three. And we would tell her, you can't do that before in practices and stuff like that. And so, and this was very quick, like game one, this is happening. I didn't know her before that. And all of a sudden she started doing it, pulled her out, sat her down next to me, didn't say anything. And she finally, which is what happens and what the reaction you're going for is like, Coach, can I get back in the game? I said, well, that's up to you. And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, you got a choice. You can sit down next to me and not listen to what we're telling you to do and run the offense the way we want to do it. Or you can go out there and do what we're telling you to do. What do you want to do? And she's a strong little kid, and I actually a lot of credit to her. She's a good kid, but a couple times she went back in, she did the same thing. And it was almost like she wasn't thinking. She wasn't being defiant or anything like that. She wasn't thinking. So back she came. She sat down next to me. I said, are you enjoying sitting next to me and Coach Marty? Are you enjoying this? She's like, no, so the message got through eventually.
Right.
Hey, I was going to say something. I'm looking at the clock here. You didn't think we were going to get through, or you were have enough for one episode. We're about halfway through our agenda.
Well, no. I thought we were going to have too much for one episode.
Oh, too much. Oh, I'm sorry. I misheard you. All right.
Yeah. And some of these things I think we'll kind of go through pretty quickly here.
Yeah.
So Murph, I'll let you ask the next question.
Okay. Let's see. I think let's skip over that one. Communication with athletes. What your do's and don'ts are, what their do's and don'ts are, what you tell them, what are the kind of your mantras that you share with them, that kind of stuff. Can you talk about that?
Communication, I would never give out a personal cell phone number. I know high school coaches do that. At the middle level, I would never do that. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of different apps. Team Snap is one. There's the Remind app. I know I had a lot of guys on the Remind app that, hey, coach, I'm homesick today. Or, hey, coach, I got to leave practice early today. I got a dentist appointment. That would be, very valuable. For me, I'm very lucky by being able to teach in the school that I coach in. My guys will stop in before their advisory. A lot of times, back when they were on my schedule, I would actually go and eat lunch with them. Just creating those extra opportunities. If I really need to talk to someone, I'll find them in the auditorium in the morning. I really do think at the end of the day that face-to-face communication is the key.
Yeah.
And it's always stressing trying to be the best that they can be.
Yeah.
Right. All of us have a certain ceiling in terms of our athleticism, or whether it's even with our jobs. Right. And it's always trying to raise that bar to push that ceiling higher and higher, and trying to get people to believe that they can do stuff at a level that they never thought was possible.
Yeah.
And with my guys, I always told them that I needed them to be leaders inside and outside of the classroom, right? I need you to be a leader in the hallway. I need you to be a leader in the auditorium. I need you to be a leader in the cafeteria. And I especially need you to be a leader in the classroom. And as much as I need you to be a leader on the court, if you're not a leader in any of those other areas, I cannot play you. Right. And I told them, being the athletic director, I set the tone, right? My athletes have to be the standard. And if my athletes aren't the standard, that makes me a hypocrite. And I know most of my guys took that to heart and some of them didn't.
Yeah.
Right. And the ones that didn't take that to heart are the ones that ended up having to miss games because, I have a standard and I have expectations. And, we were very clear from the get-go what those expectations were. And, that determined, our season and who played and who did not play. How about you, Murph?
To me, communication is vital. It's super important. And I think it boils down to, like you said, being a leader yourself with them, communicating, I think just honesty with them, and tell them that we all have something to learn and that I too have something to learn. I told my kids, at the end of the season this year, I learned a lot about coaching from you as well, because every group is different. Every group has different motivations and things like that. But kind of the cornerstones of those things, I think, are, if you will, honesty and trust. And that is being honest with them. Again, not trying to, they're still young, they're still growing and stuff, but give them the message they can handle, but trust them to handle it, first of all, and allow them to trust you that you're always going to be honest with them, and fair as much as you can be. And sometimes we make mistakes, certainly there. I made a few of those this year, certainly. Just building that trust where you can get to the level where you can say just about anything to them about whether it's leadership or things that they should do, things that they shouldn't do, on the court, carrying themselves, things like that. So it's just about building that with them. And when an athlete trusts you to help them in some way, because they come to you and they ask, hey, Coach Murph, or this year it was Murph, because they were very comfortable with me. But
my guys call me Sully.
Yeah, that's good.
As long as they're not calling me Ed or any other bad name, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, exactly. But they come over and they ask, is there, I want to work on this, or can you watch me shoot and see if my form is good, or that kind of stuff. And to me, that means you made that connection, and that means that they trust you. They feel like he's going to help me be better. So I'll just leave it at that. But that's basically what it is. It's about communication, truth, being honest, and building that trust, really both ways, if you will. So
very good. Well, Murph, we're running out of time here.
Yeah.
As we close things up, is there anything with your coaching philosophy that we did not get to that you wanted to touch upon here before we leave the viewers for this episode?
Let me think.
I love throwing you on the spot, Murph.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I'm actually thinking. I'm thinking about it. So, you know what it is? I think the thing that I talk a lot about with the kids, besides some of the things that we've already reviewed, is what winning is. And I ask them the question, knowing that they're going to give a limited answer to start with, and then trying to expand that. Limited meaning, we want to win this game. We want to win every game. We want to win the championship. And those are all what I say is obvious goals, right? But whether it's, whatever kind of team you have, it's about it doesn't matter. I mean, we had our team, our 8th graders won 3 championships in 4 years. They were a very talented bunch.
They won in spite of the coaching.
Exactly. No, that's not true. That's true. All right. Anyway, girls are like, yeah. But no, I lost my train of thought. You threw me off, man.
I have that effect on people. Okay.
Yeah. But what was I saying now? Little victories. I'll say 2 things. One is that you teach a kid to break things down. We had a girl years ago that played for us, and she was kind of a combination of those things. She was kind of doing it to be social. She wasn't super talented. She actually, at the beginning of the year, did not have a good attitude. And we slowly worked with it. And we basically, she was not a good shooter and things like that, but she wasn't afraid to kind of get in people's faces. So we harnessed that, and we said, we want you to play defense. Now my daughter's yelling she's hungry.
She's hungry for more Murph and Sully Youth Athletic podcast. Of course. She wants more content, Murph. Feed her the content.
She wants to be an interview guest. She will be one despite that. But so we taught her. We just worked on her with playing defense, and frankly we worked on her with, hey, you can't show up and not give your all in practice. You can't do that to the other members of the team. The other people care more than you do. Yeah, but you can't show that you don't care. You got to work till you care, and she did. So it's the little things, like I said, when those couple of years where we didn't have as much competition. We worked on things within the game within the game, to say to kids, you need to work on this, and I don't care who the opponent is, or you need to work on something that you're uncomfortable doing. Do it. Make mistakes. Go out there and do it. That
works on the flip side too. I've had a lot of teams that have been lucky to win maybe 1 game, sometimes 0 games in a season.
Yeah.
And Don Kraus taught me this as well, and Don's taught me a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
But with those teams, you set 2 to 3 goals a game, goals that that they can attain. And at the end of the game, no matter what the scoreboard says, winning's just an outcome.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if we accomplish those 3 goals, we won the game.
Yep.
Right? Because we set a goal, we put what we learned in practice out there to play, and we accomplished our goals, and that's the win.
Yeah. Well, John Wooden used to say, I read a couple of his books, and one of the comments that he made in the few games that he lost in the years that he played or he coached, his UCLA years, he said, when you lose, it's just that you ran out of time. And the good news about that is life isn't really like that in a sense. Like the game is, and sports are a microcosm of that. But I guess you run out of time when we all go. But up until that point, you're never out of time. You can always do something more, do something different, do something better. Keep trying, being creative and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of cool that you have that. There's the saying that we say all the time, right? You win, or you learn. So most people don't win as much. And we say that too with teams we're playing that are better than us over the years. We played an undefeated team in volleyball years and years ago, and we beat them in the playoffs because I said to the girls over and over again, this team hasn't lost all year. They don't know what it's like. You have lost. They lost their first 7 games. So that builds character, it builds resolve and all that stuff. So it's good. They're all good lessons.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, we're just trying to develop, respectful and responsible young men and women.
Yep.
Right. We're trying to get them ready, not only for their high school sports, but being high school students and ultimately being individuals.
Yeah.
So, well, Murph, it was great talking today about our coaching philosophy. And, we're going to transition into our next show. If you look at the bottom, there it is. Tune into our next episode, live streaming on Tuesday, March 24th. The topic, officiating in youth athletics. So we actually are going to bring on our first guest onto the podcast, Chief Steve Riley, Dr. Bobby Adamo. And Murph, I'm really looking forward to having these guys on because they are 2 individuals that officiate for all the right reasons. They don't do it for the money. They don't do it for their ego. They do it because they love kids. So I'm looking forward to them giving you the business and putting you in your place.
Well, it is funny. We'll talk about it then, but we always joke as they're going up and down the court about them throwing me out of games, because those are two guys I rarely give the business at all to. I tell them they miss calls because they do,
And I encourage them to throw you out of games.
Yes, I know. Many people do.
I'm screaming from the stage, will you toss him already? Get him out of here. So
true.
Thank you all for joining us here on episode 3 of Murph and Sully's Youth Athletics Podcast. If you like this show, please hit the subscribe button. We're going to continue with this live streaming, and we'd love to have your comments during the show. As you saw during the show, we will even post your comments on the screen, and we just encourage you to pass on but what's wrong? Well, you have that look on your face.
Post comments on the screen?
Yeah, didn't you see us post the comments earlier? You didn't see that part?
I didn't see anything bad, so I guess that's good. No. I think only you're seeing that, but that's okay.
Well, no, Murph, if you look at the screen here, when you were talking about the young lady shooting threes, Wombat Carnival, the band says, can you see that, Murph? Why stress the kid? So, we can post comments, and we will continue to post comments. But for Murph, I'm Sully. We want to thank you once again for joining Murph and Sully's Youth Athletics Podcast. We'll see you next time.